If you haven't heard, myself and the crew over at my podcast, The Pro Audio Suite, have collaborated with Centrance to create our very own audio interface that's specifically designed for voiceover actors. It's called the Passport VO, and it is an amazing product that we want to bring to the world, but we cannot do it without reaching a special goal. We have to have pre-sold 100 units in order for Centrance to put this product into production. I'll tell you, there are just no audio interfaces that check every single box that's really important to a voiceover actor. And this thing also replaces multiple pieces of gear in a studio, like a mic mute switch, a mic switcher. So you have the ability to switch between two microphones at any time with the press of a button, each one of them at the right gain. It has two audio interfaces inside the box. So one is dedicated to recording, and the other one dedicated to communications like Zoom and Source Connect. You can do playbacks, it's all built in. Head over to centrance.com/passportvo if you're interested in picking up one. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is George the Tech. I hope you have a great one.
George the Tech.
Well, here we are. It's the very end of the show. We're at Avalon, and I found a friend of mine, Scott Hamilton. Not related to Hamilton Steel, right? Is that your side project?
It could be. Guys, Scott is the actual owner, so we had a good laugh about that. And they actually make some of our parts.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
That's freaking great, man. I love it.
A lot of our metals.
So, are you with Avalon, or do you support them in some way?
Both. I'm a test engineer for Avalon Designs, and I also work at their service center, Audio Rehab, which is just a little up the road from where we are in San Gabriel. But yeah.
So you know them from birth to death.
Oh yeah, I get them in there at 30 years old, and I'm the last set of hands that calibrates it before it goes out the door to the new owners.
That's incredible. Well, I mean, we all in voiceover know the 737. It's so venerable. What is it that makes the 737 so well loved?
Consistency, probably, if I had to guess. They're really, really well built. Never ever cut a corner in the design. It's the same design that it's always been since it came out, 30-ish years ago. And it's just one of those things where it's well made, it's high quality. You can recreate the results on anyone that you walk up to. And it's just one of those industry standard staple things. Like you can't go to a studio in Atlanta without seeing one of those on a producer's table. Like, it's the preamp that everyone in Atlanta uses.
Yeah, I mean, I started seeing it in voiceover at like Davis Glick, which was doing a lot of the promo. Yep. This was the go-to, and that was 20 years ago.
There's a few, us, the Manley Vox Box, like the all-in-one channel strip, preamp, compressor, EQ. I mean, that's kind of all you really need to do if you're doing voiceover and catching a voice. So it's nice to have a quality piece that has you can reach up and grab the knob, twist it, and it does what it's supposed to do every time. When we calibrate these, the compression's calibrated to 100th of a decibel. So if you're reducing by 3 dB, I promise you it's 3 decibels that it's pushing down on it. And the EQ, like I said, is flat as it possibly can be, and it doesn't add much color, it just will add and cut frequencies.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a particular preamp. When you mentioned the Vox Box, when I think of the Vox Box, I think color. When I think of this Avalon 737, I think of more transparency.
It's more, it does add warmth because there's tubes there, and whatever, your version of warmth is, it does something to it. But yeah, it's not adding a lot of dirt or anything to it. It's one thing with these, there's 40 decibels of clean gain available to you.
Plus a little bit more at the output stage. You can always...
Right, yeah.
You can always coax.
Yeah, but you can add 10 dB, right here. But again, it's one of those things where it's very clean, it's very precise. It actually punches above its weight as far as calibration goes from everything that I've learned over the years. Like I said, 100th of a decibel is what we're calibrating to, and no one can hear 100th of a decibel difference. You can get to a half a dB or a quarter dB in a nice studio and hear that, but 100th, it's really precise. And I think that's the consistency and the precision. If your voice is your instrument, and you can shape it to where it suits your needs.
Well, I actually had the opportunity to put a V5 in for Tara Strong. Never ever had to touch it. Works absolutely perfectly all the time. What makes that one an interesting alternative to the 737?
Okay, so the V5 is all solid state. It was their first venture into kind of like a hybrid surface mount and through-hole build. And there's a lot of arguments and people in the threads and the feeds that are talking, oh, this is better, this is better. I can tell you, surface mount, the noise is less. We use the through-hole components where it matters. You know, like polystyrene capacitors sound better than electrolytic capacitors in audio paths. That's just a fact.
And they last longer.
Yes, they do. They're a little bit more fragile on the installation portion because they're sensitive to heat, but that's why they're hand soldered. You drop the temperature on the soldering iron, you hand solder them in at the appropriate temperature, and you go on.
Gotcha.
So where it counts, like I said, they're not cutting corners. It's, you know, the audio path is as pure as possible, and
how does that tone control work? What's going on? Is it switching through a series of different sets of circuits?
It's a different set of filters. So there's pre-shaped, predetermined ones, which are basically the ones in a U5. Plus it also adds some kind of like high pass, low pass, little high bumps. So there's a little bit more tone shaping available than a U5. But it also has the instrument input. It's got a line level input. It'll run phantom powered mics. The other great thing that the V5 does is got some other output options which make it really flexible. So there's a tip ring sleeve balanced output in parallel with the main XLR balanced output. There's a separate input on the back of the unit. So if you leave something just patched in, you can do it that way. And there's also a separately isolated transformer output separate from the two main outputs. So there's a third output available and headphones. So there's 4 outputs that you could potentially use to push signal somewhere else in your system.
It's a kind of a Swiss Army knife thing.
It really is kind of useful in that way. And the headphone amp actually sounds really good too. Again, like I said, it's a kind of a pure, very clean, crisp audio path. So what you see is what you get.
Well, speaking of what you see is what you get, there's this thing over here. It's a plug-in.
Yes. Universal audio.
I've done a little. I have one client where we actually did some shooting out.
Okay.
We found that this seems to push a little bit around 500 hertz, maybe. It's like a little bit more forward. But that was what we found, and that was with one particular 737 though. So what have you done listening of the plugin yourself?
We have a system here to do it right now.
Yeah. What have you played around with it? How faithful do you think it is?
I mean, they wouldn't have licensed it to UA if they didn't agree that it was close, you know.
Yeah.
Like I said, obviously if you're going to shoot it out, right now we have the headphone amp is toggling the outputs of the UA and the 737. So there's going to be some tonal differences because you're listening to converters and all this stuff. So yeah, I mean, if you want to get in the weeds and really split it apart, yeah, there are going to be some differences. But if you turn the EQ and you turn the compression to your regular settings,
it's calibrated the same, you get the same results.
Calibrated the same, it reacts the same. The only difference between the plug-in and the hardware unit is this ×4 on the attack.
Right.
So standard, a 737, if you set it all the way fast, it's a 1 millisecond attack time. Initially, when it was first designed, it was 2 milliseconds, and Babyface wanted it faster. He asked for 1 millisecond, so they did what was the Babyface mod, and then that actually became into the production because everyone wanted it after Babyface.
Yeah, when I had that one restored, you said, "Oh, we just do the Babyface mod for you. It's just part of the deal."
Yeah, yeah. So that's part of it. But that's the only difference is you can, you know, in the digital realm, making it 4 times faster is easier. They're actually at some point working on doing that in a real 737 version 2. But it takes a lot of engineering to figure out how to do that with resistors and capacitors, and to get it to operate as you would want it to.
Well, it's really great seeing you in person. I've seen you a bunch of times, but it's the first time I've seen you here at the show, and it's great to hear from you, Scott.
You too. Thanks, man. Good seeing you.
We'll see you out on the road one of these days.
Yes, sir.